I'm Brian from RC Workboat Haven. This is part one of a build series. We're going to be converting the standard Haven 34 hull into a remote control sailboat. This is going to involve a fair amount of experimentation. I'm going to have to probably adjust my work after I've finished it. I'm not sure about the weight and balance, and I'm not sure about the position of sails and so on. This schooner model could be described as a pond sailor. There's 4 pounds of weight added to the bottom of the original fiberglass keel. That gives it a bit more stability, and there's 4 pounds of internal ballast. So the boat is somewhat stable, but it certainly couldn't handle any rough weather. With a pond sailor, the sheets on the sails are all fixed in position. And the idea is to maneuver the boat so that the wind hits the sails. On the RC boat that we're going to construct, we'll be able to adjust the sails to the wind and then pick any course we choose. It's going to be much simpler. The simpler, the better. This should be an interesting build. Thanks for watching. We're going to be building a gaff cutter. The length on deck is 34 inches, the beam is 10.5 inches, the draft is 10 inches, and the weight should be approximately 30 pounds with batteries and sails and so on ready to run. In appearance, the cutter resembles a pilot boat, very simple in design. In our model, the deck will be flush with the top of the railing, so there'll be no chance that water can flow over the deck and find its way down below. The keel extension here is 6 inches below the original fiberglass keel. We're going to be using steel or lead as the weight in this keel. Canvas sails made of drop cloth, hardware store rope, dowels from the hardware store for masts. I want the sail adjustment to be the most simple and basic control. There will be an auxiliary motor, like on the pond sailing schooner. So let me explain why I picked this particular shape for the keel. The vast majority of radio control sailboats that you see today would have an extended keel running straight down and a bulb down at the base, usually made of lead. The only place that you can use a model like this and sail it is in a weedless area, because the weeds will catch on this area here and also catch on the rudder, which is likely a spade rudder on most designs. The older shape keels on radio control sailboats. The advantage with that is that when the boat sails into weed, it's likely to just wash under the keel and it won't be a problem. And that is how I arrived to the shape of the keel that we're going to put on this hull. I constructed a profile made of heavy paper. I have the same line on the keel post coming all the way down. An extension here for the rudder shoe will be molded into the keel, epoxied in, and that will hold the foot of the new rudder, which is much deeper but a bit narrower in profile. And here is where the propeller will come out in the same spot as on the other models. I've decided to go with the original width of the keel, which is about 1/2 an inch. And the original idea was to use 1/2 by 1/2 solid hot rolled steel cut to the right length, and then all epoxied together, forming a fairly solid weight. I was able to find lead pieces at a better price than buying hot rolled steel, believe it or not, and that's what I'm going to use on my first keel. The weight of this keel, about 16 to 18 pounds of additional weight. Find a very flat piece of board. So the first thing I did was take my pattern and trace this perimeter out on a piece of basswood that was 1/16 of an inch thick. This gave me a nice lip that I could glue wood to. So it was glued on in this position here. Then I cut strips of basswood that were 5/8 of an inch and glued them on all the way around the perimeter to get the basic shape. So while this was on the flat, I put 2 layers of kitchen cling wrap inside the recess that I had made. And then I set the weights in, one on top of the other. There's 3 layers here, so there's plenty of air spaces. After they were all in position, I poured in 250 milliliters of polyester resin, and that has set up now here. My next step is to get some short strand fiberglass and run a bead across this upper surface here to make it level with the 5/8 basswood flange that I've put around the outside. I want to point out that I've got a piece of pine just laid in here. It's about 1/2 an inch square. I'll be able to fit a piece of 1/2 inch square fiberglass into the keel, which will support the bottom end of the rudder. I'll cut that out later. So I'm going to mix up some of this short strand fiberglass here, and I'm going to use a flat piece of wood, and I'm going to just smooth it off like this. It won't be perfect, but at least I'll have a uniform thickness. And then we'll see what we got. So here's the keel the next day. The short strand is all set up. We've got a few lumps and a few depressions. I'm going to just lightly file this off flush, but I don't want to file too much and damage my 5/8 thickness lip here. I've filed off any of the high spots, and it's roughly at the same level as the 5/8 flange. So now I'm going to pull off the cling wrap just around the edge. I'm going to use a flat screwdriver and just pry it up in this area. Oh, and it comes right out. That looks pretty good. And here's the keel. And there's the other side. So now I have a pattern in good condition that I could use to make another sailboat keel. So I've gone over both sides with a file. I've given a light sanding. And now I'm going to go and put one final layer of short strand fiberglass on both sides, and I'll do the joint here to try to get more of a 90-degree angle. So that second layer really evened things up. Now I've got something I can work with. There's 2 areas that I'm going to have to do some filing on. One is here. I have to shave it off and approximate 1/2 an inch in total thickness. And up forward, I'm going to have to shave off a little bit of material. So what I'm going to do is get a piece of wood here that's approximately half the distance in thickness, and I'm just marking it like this. And now I'll be able to get a center line on the keel. And now I'll do the keel post. So I'll know approximately how far I've filed and sanded down. I sanded off both sides of the keel in the after area down to approximately 1/2 an inch in thickness. And I've done the same thing up forward in this area here. Next, I'm going to cut out the recess that I can fit the rudder shoe into after the keel is installed on the boat. After the hacksaw cut here, I'm just using a pair of pliers to pull out the piece, just like that. Now I'll clean that up a little bit with some sandpaper. Next step, I'm going to prep up the hull so that I can attach this keel onto the bottom. Now to attach the keel, this area here would obviously have to be roughed up. I always use 80 grit sandpaper. But I'm not just going to do this area here, I'm going to do the whole hull and inside the flange on the interior. The very same thing I did in Bad Weather Ship Build Part 1. So now the hull has all been sanded. I've set up the keel in place. The table isn't level, but I've got a flat board on it. So I have the boat fairly well positioned here. In order to make sure that I'm properly centered at the after end of the keel, I've put a piece of doweling here and taped it onto the front on the stem so that it is in alignment in this direction here. And I put a mark up at the top. I've lined up the center of the keel right here with this mark at the bow. So now I'll mix up some epoxy and just put it in 3 spots on the keel to hold it in place. So I did this on both sides. Now I can remove the clamps and the upright piece on the bow. These 3 spots of epoxy have definitely firmed the keel up in place. Now I'm going to sand with 80 grit these 3 spots and make them as smooth as possible. I've put masking tape along the seam here so that from the other side I can brush in polyester resin. Then I know that all the voids where the 2 parts come together have been filled. Now I'll set the hull up level on its side and brush polyester resin into this seam. Now I've got a very solid joint in here, solid as a rock. Next step, we're going to install the rudder shoe. So here's the pattern that I used in the Bad Weather Ship Build series. It shows me where the rudder shaft hole goes, right here. I'm making a mark. I'll drill a pilot hole for the rudder shaft here with a 2mm bit. And then I'll follow it through with 3mm. I've got a straight shaft here. Bit tight. That's good. So for the rudder shoe on my models, I use fiberglass rectangular rod that is 1/2 inch by 1/4 inch. These are chain link tensioning bars. They're available in every hardware store. I want my shoe to be parallel with the original keel or sloping upward slightly. So that looks pretty good on the fore and aft position. So up top here, I'm going to make a mark. And I'll drill this hole out to 3mm and get it perfectly straight. I've put a nut on the threaded end of this propeller shaft, which is totally straight. I've also placed a piece of basswood 1/16 of an inch thick to raise the shoe up into the right position. Now I'll mix up some epoxy and glue this rudder shoe in place and make sure that it's lined up in this direction here. So that looks fairly straight. Next step, I'll sand this joint off flush with the keel, and then we'll put one layer of short strand fiberglass all the way along to fair things up. The short strand fiberglass is all set up. I've given it a sanding on both sides and around the keel. So I'm going to just give it one more coat now of Bondo body filler and try to eliminate any of these little imperfections here. And then I'll sand up the whole keel and we'll take a look. So that Bondo and some sandpaper really cleaned up the whole keel. I've got a good joint, a little radius down in here. Next step, latex primer. So here's the cutter already showing signs of balance. This brings us to the end of part 1. Don't miss part 2. Feel free to like or comment. And of course, you are always welcome to subscribe. Thanks for watching.